Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do here on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Kyle Lukoff. Kyle is a National Book Award finalist and the Newbery and Stonewall award-winning author of multiple books for young readers, including When Aiden Became a Brother, Call Me Max, Too Bright to See, and my little golden book about pride. He's here today to talk about not one, but two new releases. A World Worth Saving, a middle grade novel that intertwines elements of Jewish mythology with an unflinching examination of the impact of transphobia, and Are You a Friend of Dorothy, a story about a famed phrase of queer history. We have got a lot to jump into today, so let's get right to the episode. Kyle, welcome to KidLit Love. I am so glad you're here today.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. I love doing podcasts, so I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, good, good. Well, I'm especially glad because I've got to give you a little backstory. I am a university teacher educator, and I am lucky enough to teach children's literature most semesters, which is just, other than your job of writing them, it's the best job of reading them and sharing with others. And one of the activities that I have my students do and that I do every semester as a model is create what we call a textual lineage, or just an archaic dig into our reading lives from as far back as we can remember to today. And we share the books that have been impactful, inspiring, changed us in some way. And I'm just so glad that I am here talking to you because a book that I didn't mention in the introduction, but I want to make sure that I name drop it now so listeners know, Different Kinds of Fruit, is on my textual lineage as a book that I feel just quite simply made me a better human and just expanded my capacity for all things. And I feel like it's a pinch me moment that I get to talk to you on the podcast today. So I'm truly honored that you're spending time with me on this podcast. Thank you so
Aw.
much.
Thank you. I also love different kinds of fruit. I'm actually working on a project right now that is related to it. I don't think I can say too much more about it, but
Okay.
it's really fun to revisit those characters in that world. And it is one of my favorite of my own books.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting. I'm going to file that away. So let's start with you. I've name dropped a couple of your books, some very recently published, Different Kinds of Fruit, a little while back, my favorite. Well, I guess I can't say favorite now because we are talking about two that I really love today. One that was very impactful. I'd love to know more about you and your books and your journey through writing and children's lit. Just kind of tell us the things. Give us the backstory of you in the kid lit world.
Sure. So I think my backstory has to begin in the year 2000 when I was 16 and I got hired at Barnes& and Noble. That really started my career at the intersection of people and books, which is where I've been for, the last 24 years of my life since I got hired there when I was 16 and I'm 40 now. And I've really not done too much else in the meantime, but I started writing with the goal of getting published in 2012 the summer before I started my job as an elementary school librarian. And at first, I thought I was just going to be one of those YA authors because the YA boom was happening, especially the like queer and trans young adult literature boom was very early, and I kind of wanted in on that gravy train. But it seemed like nobody wanted to publish my young adult novel. So I decided to give up on that and see if I could sell this funny little idea for a picture book that I had had way back in 2006 when I graduated from college. And that became my debut as a published writer. And that was a book called A Storytelling of Ravens, which came out in 2018. And then not too long after that book sold, I then sold another book to the same publisher called Explosion at the Poem Factory, which is about a poem factory that explodes. So my
Mhm.
first two books were about wordplay and language, which are the subjects that I think really deeply about all the time, and just a specific, you know, corner of my nerdy interests. And then I really wanted to write something more trans focused because I got a sense that there was openness to that in the market, especially written by a trans person. And so I wrote When Aiden Became a Brother, and it was kind of a journey getting that published. For a long time, I didn't know if it was going to happen. For a long time, I didn't know if the book was any good. But then that got published, and that's really what sort of for me marks the beginning of me making a name for myself in this industry because I love my first two books, but those are the kind of books that like come out. Some people really love them. There's like the occasional bookstore that will always stock copies because they love them, but those aren't going to make a much bigger impact in the way that Aiden did and then my subsequent work did.
Mhm. If I could only choose one word to describe the first book we're going to talk about, which is A World Worth Saving, it's wow. That's my one word review. Wow.
But
Because
is that like a wow or a wow? Because
it's
wow
a
can be a lot of things.
it's an oh my gosh, I love it. There's so much wow. Like an awe-inspired wow. It's a good wow, Kyle. It's a really good wow.
Okay, good. I mean, I hope so, given that you invited me to be on this podcast. But
Yes.
I
Yes.
always like to check.
Yeah. And follows in line with what you just said. Like this is like I don't know, is the word niche? Is it niche? Is it your thing? Like these books are just so powerful and give people either the chance to be seen or in my case to see and to just be better as a result of reading it. And in this book that we're talking about, your newest middle grade, a world worth saving, there's so much that we could dive into. And so I'd love for you to start by giving readers, no spoilers, of course, but a gist, an overview of the book and the inspiration behind this particular novel.
Sure. The problem is that, this book came out in February and I've been working on it since 2021. And I even went on book tour where I went all over the country talking about it. And you would think that by now I was pretty good at summing it up in one to two punchy sentences, and it's still really hard for me.
Mhm.
The easy way to describe it, the easiest shorthand is to say that it's as if Percy Jackson was trans and Jewish. On the surface, it's sort of your standard fantasy adventure quest novel where we follow the main character learning that his like interpersonal woes are tied up in something bigger, supernatural, much more sinister, and he has this sort of unique responsibility to help, you know, if not save the world, then at least save his particular corner of the world. But I tried to do something that was much deeper than that because I don't actually like the idea that there's ever one chosen one whose job it is to save the rest of us, because that's not in line with my belief about really anything about how the world works. And also, when I started writing this book, I thought that it was going to be kind of like surface level when it came to the Jewish content. I knew that the main character was Jewish in the same way that I was Jewish, which is to say, raised reformed in a part of the world without a lot of Jewish community, with like relatively minimal Jewish education, but also the sense of like isolation and singularity that comes from being such a dramatic minority in your surrounding area. And then the more I wrote the book, the more deeply Jewish it became, and not just because of the mythological well that I was drawing from, but also larger ideas and themes, and even how I wrap it all up at the end. Um, this book became more Jewish as I wrote it, and so did I.
Hence the wow. of of all of those things that were in there. And that's why I feel like there are so many entry points for a reader to just fall into the book. I admittedly was reading this with Google right next to me. Like I wanted to imagine, I wanted to know the backstory. I really feel like I learned so much in the process of reading this in a way that was just enthralling, right? To imagine, uh, and this is where it's like, what do I say? What do I don't say? But to imagine these scenes where this, oh my gosh, what is happening scene is going on in the midst of some really hard emotional experiences that kids are going through. You have both, like you said, maybe the surface level, which is that fantasy element, that mythological element, and then those deeper themes running of identity and who we are and what counts and who we get to be at the same time, which was where that one word review comes from.
And I think that that was part of what made this book so hard for me to write. It went through so many drafts.
Mhm.
And when I finished the first draft, I had no idea how it ended. And I think it took me a whole nother draft before I figured out the ending. Because for me, I knew that this book had all these different elements. It has Jewishness in it, it has transness in it, it also has transphobia, it also has I mean, not just transphobia, but like very recent elements of trans history in terms of like the backlash against trans identity and trans youth in specific. And I didn't know how the supernatural element connected to the real world element. And it was a very both like difficult, exhausting, but extremely boring process where I literally just went on a lot of walks and
Yeah.
I would think about it and I would try to come up with connections and reasons because I can't write a book where any element is just because. And I also try to avoid relying on coincidences or luck. I
Mhm.
want everything to make sense internally. And I don't want there to be any elements that can be hand waved away as like, I don't know, because magic. But it turns out that it's much easier to wave things away and say, I don't know magic than it is to figure out why is there this like supernatural protection figure and what is it really and why is it drawn to this one particular kid
Mhm.
and how is the transness related to the anti-trans oppression related to the supernatural elements related to the non-supernatural elements. It just was like putting together a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces were upside down and you
Yeah.
had to like cut some of them to make them fit.
Yeah. But in the end, what ends up happening, at least for me and this reader, is that, as you put those pieces together on your walks and things made sense, as a reader, I'm asking myself the same question. Well, what is this? And where does this fit in? And where does that fit in? And slowly it does just all logically come, it just all logically comes together in this great way. So your walks certainly paid off. And I'm curious, do all of your books, even though we're only talking about two today, do all of your books kind of come to you that way, where sometimes you don't know and you just sit with it and write with it and walk with it? I'm just curious.
I think, I mean, to some extent, yes. All of my books, I know where they begin and I know where they end, and I have a vague sense of how they get from point to point, but
Mhm.
I also don't, I intentionally do not map out the larger themes of character development or the larger ideas or questions that I'm exploring because those are the things that come through by accident where I will write a sentence and I won't know where it came from. And I'll think, oh, that sentence is saying something that I'm really curious about. Now I have to go back to the beginning of the book to figure out how to work in this one sentence from the start to the end. But I'll say with A World Worth Saving, I had less of an idea of where it ended up, and that's partially where the book came from. Usually, well, with my first novel, with Too Bright to See, the whole book just kind of came to me in a flash while I was sitting at my library at the elementary school that I used to work in. And then Different Kinds of Fruit also came about kind of similarly. I had a good idea of like the story that I wanted to tell. And I wasn't as worried about how the story got told because the plot elements felt less necessary. Like in that book, you really could substitute a lot of different things for the plot driver and it would still work as a story. Whereas for this one, the idea was given to me by a friend of mine, by a librarian that I know, who told me that I should write a book about a golem that protects trans kids. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let's see if I can do something with that. So the idea came from her, which meant that I didn't have the same like uh independent arrival to it that usually helps me conceptualize the text as a whole.
Mhm.
And then also with this book, I kept trying to put in different plot elements that just weren't working. And it seemed like the story was like fighting with me to become what it eventually became. And that is not something that I'm used to. I'm used to feeling like I have much more control over where the story goes. And in this one, I felt very out of control with it. And at some point, I just was like, I sure hope I can pull this off because I already got my first advance check. And if I can't pull it off, I think I have to pay that back. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting now because hearing you say that, there were three things for me. I don't know if they're themes or just things that as a reader resonated with me for whatever reason. Maybe I needed to hear them. But one of them was strength and finding strength in yourself and realizing, okay, why is A going through all of this? You have a beautiful well, it's more than one line, but it's a beautiful couple of lines where the golem is saying, I am here because, and it's basically because of A's strength and the 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 claim he's trying to make.
Where it says
Yeah.
you are in the midst of your own creation, which gives you strength beyond imagining.
Uh-huh. I was like, can I read it? Yes, that is exactly it. It's a beautiful, it's just such a beautiful piece of the book of finding that inner strength while at the same time, and it comes to light a little bit later, the second thing you just mentioned, which is sometimes you do have to let go of things too. And there's a scene towards the end of the book where the character has an experience, I don't want to say what it is, where certain feelings and expectations and hopes um, are let go of in order for the character to move forward, to feel better, to kind of stake that claim. So just like you said, you're writing it, you didn't know where it was going to go, so you had to just see. I see that strength in the book. I see the letting go in the book. And I also see, which I love because you talk about this at the end in the note on research, reminding us something you started the top of the episode for, that telling stories is not a privilege reserved only for rabbis or philosophers or scholars, but one that belongs to all of us. And those are the themes I saw: the strength, the letting go, and the storytelling that we want, the story we want to tell about ourselves. Just so powerful.
Thank you. I'm very proud of this one, but it was very nerve-wracking to put it out into the world because I didn't know if I pulled it off. Like, I hoped that I did and I thought that I did, but I can't know that for sure until other people tell me,
Yeah.
basically.
Well, I hope I'm one of the first that say, job done.
Thank you.
So that book, A World Worth Saving, clearly a middle grade novel, but we get to talk about another book since you've had a trio of books published recently, which is a picture book. Are You a Friend of Dorothy? And I want to make sure I read the subtitle because the subtitle is just the best. Okay, listeners, it's this. Are You a Friend of Dorothy? The true story of an imaginary woman and the real people she helped. I mean, what better subtitle for
It's a
the
good one. I don't remember if I came up with that or my editor did. I think I did, but if it was my editor, I don't want her to listen to this and be like, no, that was me, Kyle.
Either way, it's really, really good. And I would love for you to give a little book talk, your librarian hat back on, give a little book talk of this for listeners, as it is likely pretty new to them since it's so recent.
Yeah, oh gosh, I don't even know where my librarian hat is. I think I might have left it behind when I moved here. Um, but it is a picture book about all of the interesting ways that people have used language to, or like secret languages and hidden codes to keep themselves safe when they weren't allowed to be honest out in public about who or what they were. This book came about because I was in the car with my husband and two of his friends going to like the beach one day. And one of them was like, "Oh my God, did you guys ever hear about the time?" And because this is like a thing that keeps like going viral every couple years. He was like, "Did you ever hear about the thing where the US military heard gay sailors refer to themselves as Friends of Dorothy and then thought that they were talking about a real woman named Dorothy and then went looking for her?" And I was like, "Yes, I absolutely did know about that already." And it's one of my favorite stories. And man, The Hunt for Dorothy would be a great title for a picture book.
Mhm.
And then I was like, "Wait a second. That is a great title for the picture book for a picture book. Someone should write that. No, I should write that. I'm gonna write this one. This is gonna be mine." And so I like went home and I wrote a couple of drafts and we ended up selling it to Simon and Schuster and it comes out in April. It started off as just about that moment in history, but then my editor rightly encouraged me to broaden the scope and have it talk more about why that phrase came about and why people felt the need to use code phrases like "Are you a friend of Dorothy?" instead of "Are you gay? Are you queer? Are you also LGBTQ?" and what else they did to find each other and to keep each other safe. Which,
Mhm.
when I wrote this book, I had hoped that it would feel like ancient, irrelevant history that no one was really going to care about. And unfortunately, it feels incredibly relevant, more relevant than I ever could have expected today in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. And fortunately, though, it's out in the world for us to learn from. It feels like, as someone, I will be honest, I didn't know that phrase. I didn't hear that story. And as I read it, it's like this beautiful phrase that has such layers of meaning underneath. And I can't remember if I can't remember where I found it, or maybe it was something in the materials about the book, but it's this idea that it's not about the so-called Dorothy, right? It is about the community around that phrase and finding your safety in your people around that phrase. And that is really hard to convey in a picture book, about an imaginary person. But I do love how that is broadened to the context and the history behind it, to what made me laugh of, them looking for an imaginary person. That, yeah, that did make me smile.
Yeah, that part is incredibly funny to me.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to make sure that we give the illustrator um, a mention here because these pictures are fantastic. These illustrations, Levi Hastings. And if you listeners, if you were to scroll through this book, it's just gorgeous. You've got these pages that some have these bright white backgrounds where the color pops out. Others have these saturated backgrounds and then the shading and gradation and the expression. I'm always amazed at how illustrators can just get the expressions on their faces with the outlines. Some are outlined in black, some are outlined in white. It's just a beautiful compliment. And I was hoping that you might say a little bit about that, of how you feel it works with your story and words on the page.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Levi did an incredible job. It is, I would say that that book is almost campy, which is a fun,
Yes.
a fun approach to take for a book that is about like queer culture. Like you said, it's very bright, it's very flamboyant, but he also does a really good job of pulling back on that when it becomes necessary. But I think the thing that I love most about this book is that every page is just bursting with life because it's not a book about hiding and it's not a book about keeping secrets. It's a book about finding people that you don't have to hide from and that you don't have to keep secrets from.
Mhm.
And he does a great job of showing what's possible and like what kind of life is possible when you don't have to hide from who you are.
Yeah. And the last line of the book, is it okay with you if I read it? I don't think it's
Yeah,
spoiling, but
I don't think so. I mean,
it's
it's nonfiction, happened a long time ago.
yeah. There never was a Dorothy, but there will always be her friends. which is the whole beautiful message of the book. Um, Such a beautiful last line. I love collecting opening lines, but this one made me want to start a new list in my notebook of beautiful last lines.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very proud of that last line too. I think it does a great job of summing up the book as a whole.
Yeah. And then you go on to give some context in the back matter. Can you talk a little bit about that message in the back of the book?
Sure, yeah. So one thing that is so uniquely hard about writing picture books about LGBTQ topics is number one, you're writing for both children and the adults who are reading this to them.
Mm.
And also, you cannot assume a baseline level of knowledge from your reader. And also, not just assuming a baseline knowledge, but really a baseline understanding of how language and concepts work. Because most children go through a phase where they are incredibly literal, where things are black and white, and where if you say something that's true, and if it's not true, they will tell you that it's not true. And then there's also the complicating factor of how, especially with LGBTQ terminology, those words have changed dramatically in the last 2 years, and the last 5 years, and the last 20 years. And also the definitions of those words have even changed. Like there's no one largely agreed upon definition of like lesbian or gay or queer or transgender. And so in a book like this, I wanted to both use language that was appropriate for the time, but also not have it sound dated. And so I just, I tried to strike a balance between those two things. And then I decided at the end it was really better if I explained my choices in language and really just saying like, here are what some of these words are usually taken to mean. That meaning can change. And here's what I was trying to do with it.
Mhm.
Um, I'm actually very, very, very proud of the back matter. It was very hard to write. But I really like explaining thorny topics to kids in ways they can understand. I think words like maybe are really helpful or sometimes are really helpful because for kids who are so literal and so black and white, you can say to them like, well, this is true a lot of the time, but not always, as opposed to saying this is what this word means.
Yeah. And I love that you love doing that because it's books like this that open up conversations in homes, in school.
Can I like read the first paragraph of the back
Oh,
matter?
please
I have
do.
to stand up and grab a copy, but it's
Sure.
right there. Okay, so there's an author's note at the very end that says, and there's like a rainbow stretching across the top, and it says gay and lesbian, LGBTQ, queer. And I said, you might have noticed that this book sometimes uses the words gay and lesbian, and sometimes the acronym LGBTQ. Sometimes it uses the word queer. You might have wondered what these words mean, what the differences are between them, and why people might use one instead of other. And that came directly from my experience as an educator working with really young children, where a really helpful way to have conversation with them is saying, this is what I'm noticing. You might have noticed this. And if you have questions about it, here are some explanations. Like it's a very intentional way of speaking to children that is honoring their experience and guiding them towards knowledge without necessarily saying, this is what is true or this is what you've experienced.
Mhm. And in doing so, as you mentioned, you are offering the people reading the book the same thing,
Hmm.
which is so important. I know when I read that back matter, it felt like, I could just relax a little bit because as someone who is trying to be a good human in the world and understand everything, I often wonder, am I getting it wrong? Am I doing enough? Did I say that right? And I can overthink everything in an attempt to to understand. And this was like, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious and I want to know and I want to support and that's enough. I can learn along this. And so
Yeah,
I felt that.
I even say at the last paragraph, it starts with saying, if you know how someone describes themselves, you should use those words for them. If you're talking about a group of people who lived in a different time and might have a different understanding of themselves, it's okay to blend your knowledge of language today with how it was used back then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That is it. Good beginning lines, good ending lines. Just a book that is going to have some great conversations. It's going to open lines of communication. It's going to do exactly what different kinds of fruit did for me at the start, which is just make us better, make us understand. And my goodness, the world needs more books like this that can help us to understand and feel and grow as humans, as well as just enjoy a really beautiful picture book with a really wonderful story in it. So we've talked about two. I would love to ask, even though I know you've had a third that's just come out, you've had other books, you're still working on books. Do you have a particular hope for your books when they go out into the world, or a hope for readers when they get this in their hands and are reading it either on their own or with their adults in their lives that are sharing it with them?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, as someone who's worked in the industry for so long, helping people find books, really, I just hope that people like it. I hope that my books manage to both reach the readers who are like, the most obvious target audience, but that also people who might not be like trans or queer or Jewish or whatever, or like, oh, this book looks interesting. I want to read it. And then they read it and they like it as a story and not necessarily as like a homework assignment or like a thing to make them better, but just as like, this is a cool book that I liked. That to me is the biggest compliment. Honestly, like one of the biggest compliments for me would be, so did you read Ramona and Her Father, right? Beverly Cleary,
Oh,
one of the
yes. Yeah.
movie books. Yeah. So there's a bit where Beezus and Ramona are trying to get their father to quit smoking, and they put up signs all around the house that say no smoking. But they get the they're not good at graphic design, so it says no smo, and then beneath it it says King. And then the dad's like, "Oh, who's Mr. King? Who's Nosmo King?" Because these signs say Nosmo King. And now literally every time I see a sign that says no smoking, I think who's Nosmo King? And honestly, that's all. I want like one weird little turn of phrase to stick in someone's brain and stay there forever. That's what I want, honestly, more than anything else,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
what Beverly Cleary did to me when I ever see a no smoking sign.
And now you're paying it forward.
Yes.
So, are there things that you're continuing to work on that you might be able to give us a sneak peek into before we wrap up today?
Yeah, so I'm currently actively working on like several books, which I don't like to do, but one of them is like kind of a secret. The other one, so we're recording this in March, but it's not going to be out till June, and I'm hoping that this other book is not a secret by June. If it's not a secret, I might like email you and be like, you could like record
Yep,
a test
we can
that.
edit out whatever we need.
Yes, because it's a very exciting secret that I've been dying to tell people. But I also have a picture book coming out next year that I'm super excited about called The Vicious Cycle, and it's about a unicycle that goes in circles and it can't get out. It is very much in the vein of the Shel Silverstein books that I loved as a kid, like The Giving Tree and The Missing Piece, and The Missing Piece Meets the Big O. Um, I'm incredibly excited for that one to come out into the world. And then I got to write one of the books in the Kids and Mrs. Z's class series, spearheaded by Kate Messner. And my book is about a little boy named Sebastian. And I'm not entirely sure of the release date for that, but that will be out within the next year or so. And I'm so excited for that one because Sebastian as a character is much more similar to me than in some ways any of my other characters. Like I really just poured every like weird little thought I ever had into his
Yep.
weird little head. And I love him so
Oh, I can't wait for that one. Can't wait for both of them, but that one sounds wonderful, and I love that series. Oh, so you're continuing to be busy, and we're all grateful for that. Thank you for those sneak peeks. Where is the best place for readers, listeners to find you so that they can keep up with those updates and get the latest scoop?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, my website is not the best place. It's just myname.com. That is a good place if you want to get in touch with me because I do have a contact form there.
Mhm.
But in terms of keeping up with whatever, the best places are probably Instagram. and Blue Sky, where my handle is either like Kyle Lukoff or Kyle Lukoff Writes.
Okay. I will put links to your website along with your Instagram and Bluehost sites right into the show notes so that people can contact you easily. And of course, links to all of the books that we talked about today in the show notes. Thank you so much. This was kind of a dream come true to get to talk to an author who had made such an impact on that line of books that has touched me as a human. So I'm just grateful. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad, and you're very welcome.
And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find KidLit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly KidLit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit Love. Thanks for listening.